The heavy scent of lilies and roses usually brings me a sense of calm, but tonight the fragrance clogs my throat like a physical weight. I lock the front door of the flower shop, turning the deadbolt with a sharp click that echoes in the silent alleyway. Rain slicks the pavement under my boots, reflecting the neon sign from the diner across the street in distorted, shimmering ripples. I pull my coat tighter around my body, hurrying toward my car with my head ducked low against the drizzle. A sharp crack splits the air, louder than the thunder rumbling in the distance, and I freeze mid-step. My heart hammers against my ribs as a shadow detaches itself from the darkness behind the dumpster. If slow burn romance with high stakes is your thing, hit subscribe. Now back to the story. Two men stand there, one gripping his shoulder while dark liquid stains his white shirt. Another man looms over him, raising a metallic object that gleams under the flickering street lamp. I press my back against the cold brick of the building, praying the shadows will hide me from their view. The man with the gun fires again, and the victim slumps to the wet pavement without a sound. Panic claws at my throat, and I clamp my hands over my mouth to stifle any noise that might escape. The shooter turns his head slowly, scanning the alleyway with the precision of a predator hunting prey. His gaze sweeps over the dumpster, missing me by inches, before he turns and sprints toward the black sedan waiting at the curb. I slide down the wall until my knees hit the hard ground, my breath coming in ragged gasps. The car speeds away, its tires splashing dirty water onto the sidewalk, leaving me alone with the body. I scramble to my feet, my legs trembling so violently that I nearly trip over my own boots. The engine of my car roars to life, and I peel out of the parking spot without checking for traffic. My knuckles turn white as I grip the steering wheel, my eyes darting constantly to the rearview mirror. Every set of headlights behind me looks like a threat, every shadow a potential attacker. I swerve into the driveway of my small apartment complex, throwing the car into park before sprinting up the stairs. Once inside, I lock the deadbolt and slide the chain into place, but the safety measures feel flimsy and useless. I pace the length of the living room, my mind replaying the image of the man falling to the ground. A heavy knock rattles the door frame, and I jump back as if the wood has burned me. Through the peephole, I see two men in dark suits standing with their hands clasped in front of them. They are not police officers because their posture is too rigid, too dangerous for a routine inquiry. The knocking comes again, harder this time, shaking the pictures on the wall. "Open up, Ms. Rossi," a deep voice commands through the wood. "We know you were there." I back away until my spine hits the kitchen counter, my hands searching blindly for a weapon. The door splinters near the handle, and the lock gives way with a groan of protest. Two large men step inside, their presence instantly filling the small space with a suffocating tension. The taller one scans the room with cold, detached eyes before locking his gaze on me. He gestures toward the door, and the other man steps aside to create a clear path for me to leave. "Mr. Morty requests your presence," the tall man says, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Do not make us carry you." I consider running for the back window, but the sheer size of the men in front of me makes the option seem suicidal. I grab my purse from the counter, though I know it offers no protection against the danger standing in my living room. They escort me out to a black SUV parked at the curb, its engine idling softly in the quiet night. One of them opens the rear door, and I slide onto the cool leather seat, the smell of expensive cologne replacing the scent of rain. The door shuts with a solid thud, sealing me inside with a man who sits in the shadowed corner. He does not look at me immediately, choosing instead to focus on the tablet resting on his knee. The car pulls away from the curb, merging smoothly into the light traffic. I watch the familiar streets of my neighborhood pass by, realizing with a sinking feeling that I might never see them again. The man finally turns his head, and the streetlights catch the sharp angle of his jawline. His eyes are dark, holding a depth of coldness that chills me more than the rain outside. "You saw something tonight that you shouldn't have," he states, his voice low and smooth like velvet over steel. "Now we must determine what happens next." "I didn't see anything," I lie, my voice shaking despite my best effort to sound brave. "I was just walking to my car." He leans forward slightly, the interior light illuminating a faint scar running through his eyebrow. "Do not insult my intelligence, Alessia. My men verified your presence at the scene within minutes of the shot." The use of my name sends a fresh wave of fear through my veins. He knows who I am, he knows where I live, and he likely knows everything else about my life. I clasp my hands together in my lap to stop them from trembling, digging my nails into my palms. The car turns onto a private road, the city skyline fading into the distance behind us. Tall iron gates swing open as we approach, revealing a sprawling mansion that looks more like a fortress than a home. We pull up to the grand entrance, where a servant is already waiting with an umbrella. The man opens the car door and steps out into the damp air, offering me a hand that I hesitate to take. I ignore his gesture and climb out on my own, smoothing my wrinkled coat with shaky hands. He leads me up the marble steps, his footsteps echoing sharply against the stone. The massive front doors open, and we step into a foyer that is larger than my entire apartment. Welcome to my home, he says, gesturing vaguely at the opulent surroundings. I am Leonardo. You will remain here until I decide you are no longer a liability. I stand near the doorway, feeling small and insignificant in the face of such overwhelming wealth and power. Leonardo removes his jacket, handing it to a waiting member of staff who appears from a side room. He rolls up the sleeves of his dress shirt, revealing forearms that are corded with muscle. Even in this relaxed setting, he exudes a dangerous energy that keeps me on edge. Am I a prisoner? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper. He walks over to a small table and pours 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter. You are a guest, Alessia, though your freedom of movement is currently restricted. Consider it a protective measure. He hands me one of the glasses, the liquid sloshing gently against the sides. I take it instinctively, the glass cool against my feverish skin. He watches me closely, his eyes narrowing as he waits for my reaction. I lift the glass to my lips, the smell of alcohol strong enough to make my eyes water. I take a small sip, the liquid burning a path down my throat and settling warmly in my stomach. Now, Leonardo says, turning his back to me and walking toward a large painting on the wall. Tell me exactly what you saw in that alley. Leave out no detail, no matter how small. I set the glass down on a nearby side table with a trembling hand. I saw a man fall. I heard a shot, then I saw the shooter running away. Leonardo turns slowly, his expression unreadable. Did you see the shooter's face? The light was bad, I answer honestly. He was wearing a hood, but I saw the car. It was a black sedan, maybe a Mercedes. He nods as if this information confirms something he already suspected. That is consistent with our intelligence. The rival family is getting bold, operating in residential areas. Rival family, I repeat, the weight of his words sinking in. You mean the Mafia. I prefer the term business organization, he corrects me smoothly, though there is a hard edge to his tone. But labels are rarely important. What matters is that you are now a loose end that must be tied up. Fear grips me again and I take a step back toward the door. You said I was a guest. And you are, he assures me, taking a slow step in my direction. But I cannot have you running to the police with a description of my car or my men. I won't go to the police, I promise, desperation creeping into my voice. I just want to go home. Leonardo stops a few feet away from me, his presence dominating the room. You will stay here, Alessia. I have a guest room prepared for you. In the morning, we will discuss your situation further. He claps his hands and a stern-looking woman appears from the hallway. Show Ms. Rossi to her room, ensure she has everything she needs. The woman nods and motions for me to follow her. I look back at Leonardo one last time, searching for any sign of mercy in his cold eyes. He swirls the liquid in his glass, his attention already drifting away from me as if I am no longer of interest. I turn and follow the housekeeper up the sweeping staircase, my footsteps muffled by the thick carpet runner. We walk down a long hallway lined with closed doors, the silence of the house feeling heavy and oppressive. She stops at a door near the end of the hall and opens it, revealing a bedroom that is beautifully decorated in shades of cream and gold. A large bed sits in the center, covered in a plush duvet that looks inviting despite my fear. The housekeeper walks over to the wardrobe and opens it, revealing rows of clothing that look to be in my size. Mr. Morty had these brought in for you, she says, her voice devoid of emotion. There is a bathroom through there. Dinner will be served at 8. She leaves the room, closing the door softly behind her. I rush over to the door and try the handle, finding it unlocked. I open it slowly and peek out into the hallway, checking to see if anyone is guarding my room. The corridor is empty, but the feeling of being watched prickles the back of my neck. I close the door and lean against it, sliding down until I hit the floor. The reality of my situation crashes over me. I am trapped in a mansion with a dangerous man who holds my life in his hands. I stand up after a few minutes and walk over to the window, pulling back the heavy curtains. The view overlooks a manicured garden and the dark forest beyond, the moonlight casting long shadows across the lawn. There are no other houses in sight, no signs of civilization beyond the high walls surrounding the property. I turn away from the window and sit on the edge of the bed, the mattress softening under my weight. My mind races with plans of escape, but each one seems more impossible than the last. A soft knock comes at the door, startling me from my thoughts. Before I can answer, the door opens and Leonardo steps inside. He has changed into a fresh shirt, the dark fabric stretching across his broad shoulders. He carries a tray with a covered silver dish which he sets down on the small table near the window. I thought you might be hungry, he says, gesturing toward the tray. Housekeeping can be unpredictable with meal times for new guests. I watch him warily, my body tense as he moves around the room. I'm not hungry. Leonardo lifts the lid of the tray, revealing a pasta dish that smells delicious, though my stomach is too knotted to consider eating. You will eat, Alesha. I need you alert and healthy for our conversation tomorrow. He pulls out a chair and sits down, his eyes never leaving my face. I hesitate for a moment before walking over to the table and sitting opposite him. The distance between us feels small, the air charged with an unspoken tension. I pick up my fork and twirl a small amount of pasta, bringing it to my mouth just to satisfy him. The flavors explode on my tongue and I realize how hungry I actually am. Tell me about your flower shop, Leonardo says suddenly, breaking the silence. How long have you owned it? I look up in surprise, confused by his shift in tone. 3 years, I inherited it from my grandmother. He nods slowly, watching me take another bite. And you live alone above the shop? Yes, I reply, setting my fork down. Why do you ask? Knowledge is power, he says simply. Knowing who is in your life helps me assess the risk you pose. I don't pose a risk, I insist, frustration replacing my fear. I just want to live my life. Leonardo leans back in his chair, studying me with an intensity that makes my skin flush. You are in my world now, Alesha. The rules are different here. Trust is a luxury that few can afford. Then why bring me here? I challenge him. Why not just kill me in the alley? A flicker of something crosses his face, too fast to identify. I am not a monster, Alesha. I do not kill innocent women who happen to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. But you kill men, I say, the accusation hanging heavy in the air. I do what is necessary to protect my interests, he replies, his voice hardening. The man in the alley was not an innocent. He was a soldier sent to spy on my operations. I look down at my plate, the food suddenly turning to ash in my mouth. The moral ambiguity of his world is dizzying, the lines between right and wrong blurred by survival and power. Leonardo stands up, pushing his chair back with a scrape against the floor. Finish your meal, he commands, walking toward the door. I will see you at breakfast. He leaves the room, the lock clicking into place behind him. I am alone again, but the silence feels different now, less oppressive and more like a pause in a larger game. I finish the pasta, the warmth spreading through my body and giving me a small measure of strength. I walk into the bathroom and turn on the faucet, splashing cold water on my face. The mirror reflects a woman who looks tired and pale, her eyes wide with a lingering fear. I climb into the large bed, pulling the duvet up to my chin. The sheets smell of lavender and sunshine, a stark contrast to the darkness of my situation. I close my eyes, but sleep is a long time coming. My mind replays the events of the night over and over, the image of the gun flashing in the dark alley. Eventually, exhaustion claims me, and I drift into a restless sleep filled with shadows and the sound of gunfire. Morning light streams through the curtains when I wake, disorienting me for a moment. I sit up and look around the luxurious room, the memories of the previous night flooding back. I climb out of bed and walk over to the wardrobe, selecting a simple pair of jeans and a sweater. The clothes fit perfectly, which only serves to remind me of Leonardo's reach and control. I walk into the bathroom and brush my teeth, trying to restore some sense of normalcy to my routine. The door unlocks and the same housekeeper from the night before enters. Mr. Morty is waiting for you in the library. Follow me. I follow her out into the hallway, my eyes scanning for exits or guards. The house is quiet, the sunlight streaming through the windows making it look almost peaceful. We descend the stairs and walk down a long corridor to a set of double wooden doors. The housekeeper knocks once and then opens one of the doors, gesturing for me to enter. The library is a sprawling room filled with floor-to-ceiling bookshelves and a large mahogany desk. Leonardo stands by the window, looking out over the estate with his hands clasped behind his back. He turns as I enter, his expression unreadable in the bright morning light. Good morning, Alesha, he says, his voice smooth and polite. I trust you slept well. Under the circumstances, I reply, walking further into the room. Where are we going with this, Leonardo? He walks over to the desk and leans against it, crossing his ankles. We are going to establish a baseline of trust. I need to know that you will not go to the authorities. And if I promise that, I ask, standing my ground, do I get to go home? Leonardo studies me for a long moment, his eyes searching my face. Eventually, but first you must understand the gravity of what you witnessed. The man who was killed was a member of the Rossi family. They are not known for their forgiveness. The Rossi family, I repeat, the name sounding familiar from news reports. They are the ones fighting you for territory. Precisely, he confirms. If they find out there is a witness, they will come for you. You are safer here than you would be in a police station. I sink into one of the leather armchairs near the desk, the weight of his words settling over me. So I'm trapped here for my own safety. You are under my protection, he corrects me gently. There is a difference. He walks over to a small bar in the corner of the room and pours a cup of coffee. Do you drink coffee? Yes, I say, the smell of the dark roast making my mouth water. He brings the cup over to me, his fingers brushing against mine as I take it. The contact sends a jolt of electricity through me, surprising me with its intensity. I look up at him, finding his eyes locked on mine, a flicker of something warm in their depths. He quickly withdraws his hand and walks back to the desk, the moment passing as quickly as it arrived. I have business to attend to this morning, he says, his tone all business again. You are free to roam the house and the grounds, but do not attempt to leave the property. The guards have strict orders to stop anyone who tries. I understand, I say, taking a sip of the hot coffee. What happens tonight? We will have dinner, he replies. I find that conversation flows better over a good meal. Perhaps we can find some common ground. The heavy oak door clicks shut behind Leonardo, and the silence of the dining room rushes in to fill the void he left behind. I stare at the space where he just stood, the lingering scent of his expensive cologne mixing with the aroma of fresh coffee and the faint, metallic tang of fear that still coats the back of my throat. The guards outside the door shift their weight, the sound of their boots scuffing against the marble floor serving as a stark reminder that my freedom is an illusion carefully constructed by the man who now owns my fate. I take another sip of the coffee, the dark liquid burning my tongue slightly, but the pain is a welcome distraction from the chaotic thoughts racing through my mind. Leonardo mentioned dinner, and the prospect of spending an entire evening alone with him sends a shiver down my spine that has nothing to do with the cold temperature of the room. I set the cup down on the saucer with a delicate clink, the noise echoing too loudly in the vast, empty space, and I push myself away from the table to explore the prison he calls a home. The hallway stretches out before me like the mouth of a beast, lined with portraits of stern-faced men who all share the same sharp, predatory eyes as Leonardo. I walk past them slowly, my footsteps muffled by the plush red carpet that runs the length of the corridor, and I wonder how many secrets these walls have swallowed over the decades. Sunlight streams through the high, arched windows, casting long, distorted shadows across the floor, but the warmth of the light does nothing to thaw the ice in my veins. I stop at a window and peer out through the thick, bulletproof glass, seeing the manicured gardens and the high stone walls that separate this estate from the rest of the world. A guard patrols the perimeter below, his hand resting casually on the holster at his hip, and I realize with a sinking feeling in my stomach that escaping this place is not a matter of simply running out the front door. I turn away from the window and continue my exploration, eventually finding a library that seems to stretch on forever, the shelves lined with leather-bound books that smell of old paper and dust. This room feels different from the rest of the house, possessing a quiet, scholarly air that clashes violently with the violence I know Leonardo is capable of inflicting. I run my fingers along the spines of the books, reading titles in Italian and English, ranging from classic literature to treatises on political history and strategy. It seems that Leonardo is a man of intellect as well as brutality, a combination that makes him infinitely more dangerous than a simple thug. I pull a volume of Dante from the shelf, the irony of the choice not lost on me, and I settle into a leather armchair near the unlit fireplace to pass the hours until dinner. Time moves sluggishly here, marked only by the shifting of the light across the floor and the changing of the guards outside the door. I lose myself in the words of the poem, finding a strange sort of comfort in the descriptions of the underworld, even though I am currently living through my own personal hell. The sound of the door opening makes me jump, my heart rate spiking instantly, and I look up to see a maid standing in the doorway, her eyes cast downward in submission. She informs me that it is time to dress for dinner, and I follow her silently from the library, my mind racing with possibilities of what the evening might hold. She leads me to a bedroom that is not my own, gesturing toward a dress laid out across the bed, a garment of deep crimson silk that looks far too expensive for someone like me to ever wear. The maid helps me into the dress, her fingers working deftly to fasten the intricate buttons at the back, and I stare at my reflection in the full-length mirror, hardly recognizing the woman staring back. The silk clings to my body like a second skin, the color vibrant against my pale skin, and I feel like a doll being dressed up for a display I did not consent to. I sit at the vanity while the maid styles my hair, pulling it back into an elegant chignon that exposes the line of my neck, a vulnerability that makes me uncomfortable but seems to be the intention. When she is finished, she leaves me alone in the room, and I take a deep breath to steady my nerves before walking out into the hallway to meet Leonardo. He is waiting for me at the top of the grand staircase, looking devastating in a tailored black suit that fits his broad shoulders perfectly, and for a moment I forget to breathe. His eyes sweep over me, an appreciative glint in their dark depths, and he offers me his arm with a gesture that is both courtly and commanding. I hesitate for a fraction of a second before placing my hand on his forearm, feeling the hard muscle beneath the fabric of his jacket, and he leads me down the stairs with a confidence that is terrifying. We walk in silence to the dining room, where a small table has been set up near the window, illuminated by the soft glow of dozens of flickering candles. Leonardo pulls out my chair for me, and I sit down, watching as he takes his seat at the head of the table, his movements fluid and graceful. A bottle of red wine breathes on the table between us, and he pours a glass for me without asking, the dark liquid swirling in the crystal goblet. "You look beautiful, Alesha," he says, his voice low and rough, sending a jolt of electricity through my veins. "Thank you," I reply, my voice barely above a whisper, and I take a sip of the wine, needing the alcohol to dull the sharp edge of my anxiety. The first course is served by silent staff who appear and disappear like ghosts, a delicate soup that I barely taste, my entire focus consumed by the man watching me from across the table. "Tell me about your shop," Leonardo says, breaking the silence as he twirls his fork in the pasta. "How long have you owned it?" I look up in surprise, not expecting him to be interested in something so mundane, but I answer him anyway, eager to keep the conversation away from the reasons I am here. "I inherited it from my grandmother 5 years ago," I explain, setting my fork down. "She built it from nothing, and I wanted to keep her legacy alive." He nods slowly, his eyes never leaving my face, as if he is analyzing every word I speak for a hidden meaning. "It is a noble thing to honor family," he says, his tone softening slightly. "Family is the only thing that truly matters in this world." The irony of his statement hangs heavy in the air between us, considering that his family is likely the reason my life is currently in shambles, but I choose not to point that out. "Do you have family, Leonardo?" I ask, the question slipping out before I can stop it, and I see his jaw tighten imperceptibly. "I have brothers," he says, his voice devoid of emotion. "And a father who demands perfection." He takes a sip of his wine, his gaze drifting toward the window where the darkness is pressing against the glass. "It is a burden, carrying the weight of a name like mine. You would not understand." I bristle at his assumption, my own frustration bubbling to the surface. "You think I don't know about pressure?" I snap, my voice stronger than I intended. "I work 12 hours a day just to keep my head above water, and now I'm here, a prisoner in your house because of something I didn't do." Leonardo sets his glass down with a sharp thud, the sound cutting through the tension like a knife, and he leans forward in his chair, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that makes my breath hitch. "You are here because you were in the wrong place at the wrong time, Alesha," he says, his voice hard but not unkind. "But do not mistake my hospitality for ignorance. I know you are hiding something, and I will find out what it is." The threat is clear, but beneath it I sense a curiosity that confuses me, a desire to understand me that goes beyond a simple interrogation. I hold his gaze, refusing to back down, even though my heart is pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. "I have nothing to hide," I lie, thinking of the ledger I saw in the shop, the one I tucked away before they grabbed me. He studies me for a long moment, a small smile playing on his lips as if he can see right through my facade. "We shall see," he says, sitting back in his chair as the main course is placed before us. The rest of the meal passes in a strange sort of truce, the conversation shifting to safer topics like art and music, subjects I am surprised to find he is knowledgeable about. He speaks of Renaissance painters with a passion that belies his violent exterior, and I find myself drawn in despite my better judgment, listening to him describe the brushstrokes of a Caravaggio with a reverence I didn't think him capable of feeling. It is in these moments that I see the man beneath the monster, a glimpse of complexity that makes my situation all the more terrifying. When dinner is finally over, Leonardo stands. And offers his hand to me, a gesture that feels incongruously gentlemanly given the threats he has leveled against me over the past few days. I hesitate for a fraction of a second, weighing the danger of refusing against the strangeness of accepting, but I know that defiance will only earn me a sharper edge to his temper tonight. I place my hand in his, and his grip is firm, warm, and terrifyingly steady as he pulls me up from the chair, guiding me out of the dining room with a possessive pressure against my lower back. We walk in silence down the long, dimly lit corridor, the heels of my shoes clicking rhythmically against the marble floor, and I wonder if this is how a lamb feels when it is led to the slaughter, calm only because it does not yet understand the knife. Leonardo stops before a set of heavy oak doors I have not seen before, and he pushes one open with a single, fluid motion, ushering me into a room that smells of old paper, leather, and the distinct metallic tang of gun oil. It is a library, but unlike any I have ever seen because the shelves that line the walls are not filled with books alone, but also with files, photographs, and what looks like ledgers dating back decades. He closes the door behind us, and the click of the lock sounds like a gunshot in the quiet space, making my breath hitch in my throat as I turn to face him. Leonardo moves past me to a large mahogany desk where he picks up a thick manila folder and drops it onto the surface with a dull thud that seems to vibrate through the floorboards. "Sit," he commands, his voice low and devoid of the warmth he showed at dinner, and I realize the interrogation is far from over. I sink into the leather chair opposite him, my hands clutching the armrests until my knuckles turn white, and I watch as he opens the folder to reveal a photograph of a man I recognize instantly. It is my brother Marco, looking younger and happier than he has in years, standing outside a building I do not know. We need to discuss what Marco was really doing in the city before he disappeared, Leonardo says, his eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that makes it impossible to look away. Because I know he was working for the rival family, and I need to know how much you told the police about his deliveries. I shake my head, the denial rising in my throat like bile because I have no idea what he is talking about, and the thought of my brother being involved in this life is a nightmare I have refused to entertain until now. I didn't tell them anything, I say, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound strong, because I didn't know anything, Leonardo, you have to believe me. He studies my face for a long moment, searching for any sign of deceit, and then he leans forward, resting his elbows on the desk as the distance between us shrinks to a dangerous degree. Your brother stole something from me, Alessia, he murmurs, his tone soft but laced with a venomous threat, and until I find it, you are the collateral I intend to keep. I stare at him, the reality of my situation crashing down on me all over again because I am not just a witness to a crime but a bargaining chip in a war I never asked to be part of. What did he steal? I ask, the words barely a whisper, and Leonardo's lips curve into a smile that does not reach his eyes. Information, he replies, tapping the photograph with a single finger, and names of men who would kill him, and you without a second thought if they knew where he was hiding. He stands up and walks around the desk, leaning back against the edge so that he towers over me, his presence overwhelming the small space between us. You are going to help me find him, Alessia, he states, his voice leaving no room for argument, because you are the only person he trusts enough to contact, and when he does, you are going to tell me immediately. I want to scream that I would never betray my brother, but the cold, hard logic of his words settles over me like a shroud, because if I don't help Leonardo, the men on the other side of this war will find me first. And if I refuse? I ask, lifting my chin in a futile attempt to show some backbone, and Leonardo laughs, a dark, humorless sound that sends a shiver down my spine. You won't refuse, he says, pushing off the desk and walking to the door, because you want to survive this, and I am the only one who can guarantee that you do. He unlocks the door and holds it open for me, a silent dismissal, and I stand up on legs that feel like jelly, walking past him with my head held high even though my heart is pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. As I step into the hallway, I hear him speak again, his voice softer this time, almost like a warning. Get some sleep, Alessia, he says, because tomorrow we start hunting. I walk back to my room in a daze, the grandeur of the mansion feeling more like a prison than ever before, and when I finally close the bedroom door behind me, I slide down to the floor and bury my face in my hands. The fear is still there, a constant, thrumming vibration under my skin, but mixed with it now is a strange, reluctant fascination with the man who holds my life in his hands. He is a monster, yes, but he is a monster who quotes Caravaggio and protects me from worse monsters, and that contradiction makes him impossible to understand. I climb into bed, but sleep does not come easily, because every time I close my eyes, I see the photograph of Marco and hear Leonardo's voice promising that I am the key to finding him. Hours later, I am still staring at the ceiling when a soft knock comes at the door and I sit up, my heart leaping into my throat as the handle turns slowly. Leonardo enters, carrying a tray with a glass of water and a small, white bottle, and he sets it down on the nightstand without looking at me. You need to sleep, he says abruptly, his posture stiff, as if he is uncomfortable with this act of kindness. I'm not drugging you if that's what you're thinking, he adds, his tone sharp, and I realize he must have seen the suspicion in my eyes. It's just melatonin to help you rest. I look at the bottle, then up at him, searching his face for any sign of deceit, but all I see is a weary exhaustion that mirrors my own. Thank you, I whisper, and he nods once, turning to leave, but he stops at the door, his hand on the handle. I meant what I said about the art, he says, his back to me. There is beauty in this world, even in places like this. He leaves the room, closing the door softly behind him, and I am left alone with the pills and the confusing realization that the man holding me captive might be the only person in the city who actually sees me. I take the pills not because I trust him completely, but because I am desperate for the oblivion of sleep, and within minutes my eyes grow heavy and the world fades into darkness. When I wake, the sun is streaming through the heavy curtains, and for a moment I forget where I am, but then the memory of the previous night crashes down on me like a tidal wave. I get out of bed and dress quickly in the clothes that were provided for me, simple but well-made trousers and a silk blouse, and I brace myself for whatever Leonardo has planned for the day. When I enter the dining room, he is already there, reading a newspaper and drinking coffee, looking every bit the powerful businessman rather than the criminal he is. He looks up as I approach, his eyes sweeping over me in a way that makes my skin tingle, and he gestures to the chair opposite him. Eat, he says, pushing a plate of eggs and toast toward me. We have a long day ahead. I sit down and pick at the food, my appetite gone, but Leonardo watches me with a stern expression until I take a bite, satisfied only when I begin to eat in earnest. Today you are going to tell me everything about Marco's habits, he says, setting his coffee cup down with a sharp clink, his friends, his favorite places, the people he used to call. I nod slowly, knowing that resistance is futile, and I begin to recount the few details I know, watching as Leonardo takes notes on a small pad of paper, his brow furrowed in concentration. It feels strange to be sitting here with him, discussing my brother like this, as if we are collaborators rather than captor and captive, and I find myself wondering if this is how he breaks people down, not with violence but with a slow, grinding erosion of their defenses. We spend hours like this, going over old memories and insignificant details that might hold a clue to where he is hiding, and the exhaustion eventually begins to weigh heavy on my eyelids. Leonardo seems to notice the lag in my responses because he snaps the notebook shut with a sudden, sharp sound that makes me jump in my chair. He stands up slowly, stretching his arms over his head, and the fabric of his shirt pulls tight against his chest, revealing the hard lines of muscle beneath the expensive material. I look away quickly, feeling a flush of heat climb up my neck, because I have no business noticing the physical strength of the man who holds my life in his hands. We are done for the night, Leonardo says, his voice low and rough from hours of speaking, and he walks around the table to pull my chair out for me. You need to sleep, and I need a drink that does not come from a stale pot. I stand up on shaky legs, grateful that the interrogation is over, and I smooth down the front of my dress with trembling hands. The silence in the room feels different now, less like a weapon and more like a heavy blanket that wraps around us both. Leonardo gestures toward the door with a tilt of his head, waiting for me to move first, and I walk past him with my heart beating a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We move down the long hallway together, our footsteps muffled by the thick carpet, and the tension that usually crackles between us has softened into something else that I cannot quite name. He stops in front of a heavy wooden door and pushes it open, revealing a bedroom that is larger than my entire apartment, with a massive bed draped in dark silk sheets. I hesitate on the threshold, my breath catching in my throat because this is the first time he has brought me here, and the intimacy of the space scares me more than the locked study did. Leonardo moves past me into the room, his presence filling the space with a scent of sandalwood and gunpowder that makes my head spin. You will sleep here, Leonardo states, turning to face me with his hands resting casually on his hips, and his expression is unreadable in the dim light of the lamp. I have had enough of you falling asleep in the chair, and I need you sharp when we continue tomorrow. I want to argue to demand my own space, but the memory of the cold, hard floor in the cell is still fresh enough to make me bite my tongue. I walk into the room slowly, feeling like I am stepping into a lion's den, and I stand awkwardly near the foot of the bed while Leonardo watches me with those dark, intense eyes. He walks over to a small table in the corner and pours 2 glasses of amber liquid from a crystal decanter, the liquid catching the light and casting dancing shadows on the wall. Drink, he commands, holding one of the glasses out to me, and I take it instinctively, the cool glass soothing my sweating palm. It will help you sleep. I bring the glass to my lips and take a small sip, the alcohol burning a path down my throat and settling warmly in my stomach. Leonardo watches me drink, his gaze never leaving my face, and then he raises his own glass in a mock toast before swallowing the contents in one long gulp. The sight of his throat working as he swallows does strange things to my pulse, and I quickly look down at my own glass, swirling the liquid nervously. Why are you doing this? I ask, my voice barely above a whisper, and the question hangs in the air between us like a challenge. Why not just throw me back in the cell? Leonardo sets his glass down on the table with a soft clink and walks toward me, stopping just inches away from where I stand. I have to tilt my head back to look up at him, and the sheer power radiating from his body makes my knees feel weak. He reaches out a hand and tucks a stray strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers brushing against my skin with a gentleness that contradicts his reputation. Because you are the only key I have, Leonardo answers, his voice dropping to a murmur that vibrates through my chest, and his eyes search mine for something I am not sure I can give him. And because I am tired of fighting you when we could be working together. I lean into his touch before I can stop myself, starved for any kind of human contact that does not involve pain or fear, and I see a flicker of surprise cross his face. He lets his hand linger against my cheek for a moment longer, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw, and then he steps back abruptly, breaking the spell that has fallen over us. The loss of his warmth leaves me feeling cold and exposed, and I wrap my arms around myself to hide the sudden trembling of my body. Get some sleep, Alessia, Leonardo orders, turning his back on me to walk toward the door, and his posture is stiff and controlled once again. I will be right outside if you try anything stupid. I watch him leave the room, listening as the lock clicks into place behind him, and the sound is both a threat and a promise. I set the glass down on the nightstand and sit on the edge of the bed, the silk sheets cool against my legs, and I wonder if I am losing my mind to feel this strange pull toward a man who is supposed to be my enemy. I lie back against the pillows, closing my eyes, but sleep is a long time coming because my mind is filled with the image of Leonardo's dark eyes and the gentle touch of his hand against my face. The next morning brings a harsh reality with the sunlight streaming through the heavy curtains, and I wake up with a start, momentarily disoriented by the luxurious surroundings. The door opens just as I sit up, and Leonardo walks in carrying a tray laden with food, the smell of fresh coffee and pastries filling the room. He is dressed in a sharp suit that fits him perfectly, his hair damp from a shower, and he looks every inch the powerful leader he is known to be. "Eat," he says, setting the tray down on the bed with a clatter, and he leans against the post at the foot of the bed to watch me. We have a long day ahead of us. I pick up a croissant and take a bite, the buttery flavor melting on my tongue, and I realize how hungry I actually am. We eat in silence for a few minutes, the only sound the clinking of the silverware against the china, but the tension from last night has returned, thick and suffocating. Leonardo finishes his coffee and sets the cup down, his eyes fixing on me with a predatory focus that makes my skin prickle. "My men found something," Leonardo reveals, his voice devoid of emotion, and he crosses his arms over his chest. "A safe house in the city that your brother might be using." I freeze with the cup halfway to my lips, my heart skipping a beat at the news, because this could be the break we have been looking for. I set the cup down carefully, afraid my hands might shake and give away my turmoil, and I look him in the eye. "Are you sure it is him?" I ask, trying to keep my voice steady, but the hope rising in my chest is hard to suppress. "Or is it just another dead end?" Leonardo pushes himself away from the bedpost and walks over to the window, looking out at the city below with his hands clasped behind his back. "We are not sure yet, but we are going to find out tonight, and you are coming with me." I stare at his back in shock, my mind racing with the implications of what he just said. "You want me to go with you on a raid?" He turns around slowly, a cold smile playing on his lips, and the look in his eyes sends a shiver down my spine. "I want you to identify him, Alessia, because if I walk in there and he is not there, I am going to be very displeased." I know that his displeasure usually ends in bloodshed, and the thought of being present for a violent confrontation makes my stomach turn. But I also know that this is the only chance I have to see my brother, to know that he is still alive, and I cannot refuse this opportunity no matter how dangerous it might be. I nod slowly, accepting my fate, and Leonardo nods back, satisfied with my submission. "Get dressed," he commands, walking toward the door. "We leave in an hour, and do not think about trying anything, because my men will be watching you every second of the way." The hours pass in a blur of activity and anxiety, and by the time the sun sets, I am sitting in the back of a sleek black car with Leonardo beside me. The city lights blur past the window, streaks of color in the darkness, and I grip the edge of the seat until my knuckles turn white. Leonardo is calm, checking his phone and reading messages, but I can feel the coiled energy radiating from him, ready to snap at a moment's notice. We pull up to a nondescript building in a quiet part of town, and the car stops abruptly. Leonardo opens the door and steps out, offering me his hand. I take Leonardo's hand, and his grip tightens around mine with a force that borders on pain, though I know he is only trying to keep me grounded in this chaotic moment. The air outside the car is cold and biting, a stark contrast to the stifling warmth of the leather interior, and I shiver as the wind whips through the narrow street. Leonardo pulls me close against his side, his body heat seeping through my coat, and I lean into him instinctively despite the fear curling in my stomach. We walk toward the entrance of the building, a heavy steel door that looks like it belongs in a bunker rather than a quiet neighborhood, and I can hear the low murmur of voices from inside. Leonardo doesn't knock, but simply pushes the door open with a heavy thud, dragging me into the dimly lit hallway beyond. The smell hits me first, a mixture of stale coffee, antiseptic, and copper that makes my stomach turn over violently, and I have to swallow hard to keep from gagging. Leonardo doesn't even seem to notice the stench, his eyes scanning the room with a predatory focus that sends a chill down my spine, and he steers me toward a cluster of men gathered around a table. They look up as we approach, their faces hard and unreadable in the harsh fluorescent light, and they immediately step aside to let Leonardo pass. He guides me into a back room, shutting the door firmly behind us to cut off the noise from the main area, and the sudden silence is almost deafening. "You need to sit down," Leonardo says, his voice low and rough like gravel crunching under tires, and he points to a worn leather sofa against the far wall. I sink onto the sofa, clutching my purse in my lap like a shield, and watch as Leonardo begins to pace the small room restlessly. He runs a hand through his dark hair, messing up the usually perfect style, and for the first time I see a crack in his armor of composure. The attack earlier tonight had come out of nowhere, a sudden explosion of violence that had shattered the fragile peace we had been building, and I still feel the phantom sting of glass shards against my skin. I look down at my hands, expecting to see them covered in blood, but they are only trembling slightly, pale and unblemished in the harsh light. Leonardo stops pacing and crouches in front of me, taking my cold hands in his warm ones, and he forces me to look him in the eye. His gaze is intense, burning with a fierce protectiveness that scares me almost as much as the attack does, and I can see the tension tightening the lines around his mouth. "Are you hurt?" he asks, his voice barely above a whisper, and he brushes a stray lock of hair away from my face with surprising gentleness. I shake my head slowly, unable to find my voice, and I see his shoulders sag slightly with relief. He stands up abruptly and walks over to a small cabinet in the corner, pouring 2 fingers of amber liquid into a glass, and he brings it back to me. I take the glass, the liquid burning a path down my throat and settling warmly in my stomach, and I feel some of the tension leaving my limbs. Leonardo leans against the wall, watching me with a hooded gaze, and I know he is analyzing every move I make, every breath I take. "They won't stop until they have you," Leonardo says, his voice hardening into steel, and he slams his fist against the wall behind him. I flinch at the sound, the glass rattling in my hand, and I look up at him with wide eyes. The reality of his words crashes over me like a tidal wave, and I realize that my life is no longer my own, but a bargaining chip in a war I never asked for. I set the glass down on the floor and stand up slowly, walking over to where Leonardo stands, and I place a hand on his arm to steady him. He looks down at my hand, then up at my face, and his expression softens just a fraction. "I can handle myself," I say, though my voice wavers betrayingly, and I try to summon a courage I don't truly feel. Leonardo shakes his head, a dark shadow passing over his eyes, and he catches my hand in his, bringing it to his lips for a fleeting kiss. "Not against them, Alessia," he says, and the sound of my name on his lips sends a shiver through me. "You have no idea what they are capable of." Before I can respond, the door bursts open without warning, and a tall man with a scar running down his cheek steps into the room. Leonardo immediately moves to block me, his body tense and ready for violence, and I peek around his shoulder to see who has intruded. The man ignores Leonardo's threatening posture and nods respectfully, though his eyes flick toward me with a cold curiosity that makes me shrink back. "We found the car," the man says, his voice devoid of emotion, and he hands a set of keys to Leonardo. "It was abandoned near the docks, just like you thought." Leonardo takes the keys, his jaw clenching tight, and he dismisses the man with a sharp jerk of his head. The door clicks shut, leaving us alone again in the suffocating silence, and I can feel the anger radiating off Leonardo in waves. He turns to me, his eyes searching mine for something I can't quite identify, and he lets out a long, ragged breath. "I have to go," he says, and the finality in his tone makes my heart sink. I need to see this for myself. I grab his arm as he turns to leave, my fingers digging into the fabric of his jacket, and I look up at him pleadingly. "Don't leave me here alone," I beg, hating the desperation in my voice. "Please take me with you." Leonardo hesitates, his conflict written plainly on his face, and for a moment I think he will refuse. He looks at the door, then back at me, and finally he nods once, a sharp, decisive movement. "Stay close to me," he warns, his voice leaving no room for argument, and he pulls me toward the door. We leave the building the same way we entered, stepping out into the cold night air, but this time Leonardo doesn't offer me his hand. Instead, he grips my upper arm, steering me toward the car with a rough urgency that borders on aggression, and I stumble slightly trying to keep up with his long strides. The driver opens the door before we even reach the car, and Leonardo practically shoves me inside, sliding in next to me and barking an order to the driver. The car peels away from the curb, tires screeching on the asphalt, and I am thrown back against the seat. The ride to the docks is tense and silent, the only sound the hum of the engine and the rhythmic thumping of my heart against my ribs. Leonardo stares out the window, his profile illuminated by the passing streetlights, and his hand rests on his knee, fingers tapping a restless beat. I want to ask him what we are looking for, what he expects to find at the abandoned car, but the hard set of his jaw warns me to stay silent. I wrap my arms around myself, trying to preserve body heat, and I watch the city give way to the industrial wasteland of the waterfront. The car finally stops near a row of abandoned warehouses, the looming structures casting long, distorted shadows in the moonlight. Leonardo opens the door and steps out, scanning the area with a practiced eye, and then he reaches in to pull me out after him. The air here smells of salt water and rotting fish, a pungent odor that clings to the back of my throat, and I pull my coat tighter around myself. Leonardo doesn't let go of my arm, his grip like a vice, and he leads me toward a dark sedan parked a few yards away. "Stay here," he commands, releasing me and pointing to a stack of crates nearby. "Do not move, do not speak, and do not make a sound unless I tell you to." I nod, pressing my back against the rough wood of the crates, and I watch as Leonardo approaches the car. He circles it slowly, inspecting every inch of the exterior, and then he tries the door handle. It opens with a sickening crunch, the metal warped and twisted, and I gasp as the interior light flickers on to reveal the devastation inside. The seats are slashed, the stuffing spilling out like guts, and the dashboard is cracked, but what makes my blood run cold is the dark stain on the driver's seat. Leonardo reaches inside and touches the stain, bringing his fingers to his nose to smell, and then he turns to look at me with a look of pure fury. He slams the door shut, the sound echoing like a gunshot in the empty lot, and he strides back to me with long, angry steps. "It's a message," Leonardo says, his voice trembling with suppressed rage, and he grabs my shoulders, his fingers digging in painfully. "They know I care about you, and they are using you to get to me." I look up. Into his eyes and see a storm of violence brewing there, something dark and terrifying that I have never seen before. "They marked my car because they couldn't get to me," Leonardo growls, and his grip on my shoulders tightens until I wince from the pressure. "But they will try again, Alessia, and next time they won't stop at paint." He pulls me against his chest, wrapping his arms around me in a crushing embrace that feels more like a cage than a hug, and I can feel the rapid thud of his heart beating against my ear. The cold wind bites at my exposed skin, but his body heat is a furnace that threatens to burn me alive with its intensity. "We are leaving," he commands, his voice leaving no room for argument, and he steers me toward the black SUV parked at the edge of the lot. I stumble slightly on the uneven pavement, but Leonardo holds me upright with a possessive hand on my lower back, guiding me with urgent purpose. He opens the passenger door and practically lifts me inside, slamming the lock shut the moment I am seated. The engine roars to life as he slides into the driver's seat, and we peel out of the parking lot with tires screeching against the asphalt. Streetlights blur into streaks of color outside the window, and I grip the door handle, my knuckles turning white from the strain. "Where are we going?" I ask, my voice barely rising above the hum of the engine. Leonardo keeps his eyes fixed on the road, his jaw set in a hard line. "Somewhere safe," he replies, his tone clipped and sharp. "Somewhere they cannot touch you." We drive in silence for miles, leaving the city limits behind and heading into the dense, shadowed woods that surround the estate. The trees loom tall and menacing on either side of the road, their branches reaching out like skeletal fingers in the headlights. I want to ask him more questions, to demand answers about who did this and why, but the tension radiating off him keeps me silent. He is vibrating with a mixture of rage and fear, and I know that pushing him now will only make things worse. Finally, the SUV slows down and turns onto a narrow, hidden driveway that I would have missed if I didn't know what to look for. A heavy iron gate stands at the end, flanked by stone pillars covered in ivy, and Leonardo punches a code into the keypad. The gates swing open with a slow groan, and we drive through, closing out the rest of the world behind us. The safe house is a sprawling structure built from dark stone and timber, designed to blend into the forest rather than dominate it. Leonardo pulls the car around to the side entrance and kills the engine, the sudden silence ringing in my ears. "Stay close," he warns, and he is out of the car in a flash, opening my door before I can even reach for the handle. He takes my hand again, his fingers lacing through mine with a desperate strength, and pulls me toward the heavy oak door. The interior is dimly lit, smelling of cedar and old wood, and he locks the door behind us, throwing 3 separate bolts into place. "No one comes in or out without my say-so," he mutters, mostly to himself, and he turns to face me with a haunted expression. "I should have killed them all when I had the chance." I step closer to him, reaching up to touch his face, and he leans into my palm like a starved man seeking warmth. "You can't protect me from everything, Leonardo," I say softly, trying to soothe the beast raging inside him. He catches my hand in his, holding it there against his rough cheek. "Watch me," he vows, his eyes burning with a fierce determination. "I will burn this whole city down before I let them take another piece of you." He leads me deeper into the house, through a spacious living area and down a long hallway to the master suite. The room is dominated by a massive bed draped in dark linens, and the windows are covered with heavy blackout curtains. Leonardo releases my hand only to strip off his jacket, tossing it onto a chair, and then he turns his attention to me. He checks me over with a critical eye, looking for any sign of injury, even though I told him I wasn't hurt. "You are shaking," he observes, and he pulls me into his arms again, rubbing my back to generate friction. "I'm fine," I lie, but my body betrays me with a slight tremor. He doesn't believe me, of course, but he doesn't call me out on it either. Instead, he just holds me tighter, burying his face in my neck and breathing in my scent. "I need you to listen to me, Alessia," he whispers against my skin. "Until I find out who is behind this, you do not leave this house, you do not go near the windows, you do not answer the phone unless it is me." I pull back slightly to look at him, shocked by the severity of his rules. "I can't just hide forever, Leonardo," I protest, but he cuts me off with a glare. "You will do as I say," he snaps, his voice hardening, "because if I lose you, I lose everything." The raw honesty in his voice stops my argument cold, and I nod slowly, agreeing to his terms because I know he is doing this out of love, however twisted it might be. He seems to relax slightly at my submission, and he presses a kiss to my forehead, lingering there for a long moment. I have to make some calls, he says, stepping back and putting some distance between us. Stay here, lock the door after me. He waits until I have turned the lock before he walks away, his silhouette disappearing into the shadows of the hallway. I stand alone in the center of the room, listening to the sound of his receding footsteps, and then I move to the window. I know he told me not to look, but I can't help myself, and I part the curtains just enough to peer. Out into the night, the rain has stopped, leaving the pavement slick and black under the streetlights, but the silence is deceptive because I know the danger is still out there waiting for its moment. I watch Leonardo walk toward the black sedan parked at the curb, his posture rigid and his hand hovering near the waistband of his jacket where I know he keeps his gun. He stops abruptly, scanning the street with a predator's focus, and then he slides into the driver's seat without looking back at the window where I stand. I let the curtain fall back into place and turn away from the glass, feeling the weight of his absence settle over the room like a heavy blanket. My injury is nothing more than a faint memory now, a phantom ache that reminds me of how close I came to losing everything, but the fear has been replaced by a cold, hard resolve that I never knew I possessed. I walk over to the desk where the ledger sits open, the pages filled with names and numbers that trace the intricate web of Leonardo's empire, and I run my fingers over the ink. This is the proof he needs, the evidence that will dismantle the traitors within his organization, and I am the only one who can deliver it to him safely. The hours drag by slowly as I wait for his return, and every creak of the floorboards makes my heart skip a beat, but I refuse to let the anxiety paralyze me. I pack a small bag with the essentials, checking the safety on the weapon he gave me, and I practice drawing it from the holster until the movement feels natural and fluid. When the phone finally rings, the sound cuts through the quiet like a knife, and I grab it before the second ring can finish. It's time, Leonardo says, his voice low and devoid of any emotion, and I know that we are moving to the endgame. I'm sending a car for you, but do not get in until you see Marco and keep your eyes open. I assure him I am ready and hang up, taking a deep breath to steady my nerves before I grab my coat and head for the door. The ride to the warehouse is tense and silent, and I keep my hand in my pocket gripping the handle of the gun while I watch the city lights blur past the window. When the car finally pulls up to the desolate industrial lot, I see Leonardo standing under the flickering floodlight, his silhouette imposing and dangerous against the backdrop of the rusted metal doors. I step out of the car and walk toward him, and the air between us crackles with an intensity that makes my skin tingle. He reaches out and pulls me against his chest, his grip tight and possessive, and for a moment the rest of the world falls away until there is only the two of us in the storm that is coming. You shouldn't be here, he murmurs against my hair, but there is no real conviction in his voice because he knows I am exactly where I need to be. I'm not leaving you to face this alone, Leonardo, I reply, looking up into his eyes and seeing the fierce pride that burns there, mixed with a terrifying darkness that promises violence to anyone who dares to touch me. He kisses me hard, a bruising press of lips that tastes of desperation and promise, and then he takes my hand and leads me inside the warehouse where his men are waiting. The space is cavernous and dimly lit, filled with the smell of oil and stale tobacco, and the silence is heavy with anticipation as we walk to the center of the room. Bound to a chair in the middle of the concrete floor is a man I recognize from the photographs, a high-ranking captain who thought he could betray Leonardo and live to tell the tale. Leonardo stops in front of the traitor, and his demeanor shifts instantly from the lover who held me moments ago to the ruthless boss who commands absolute loyalty. You thought you could steal from me and threaten what is mine, Leonardo says, his voice echoing off the metal walls and carrying a deadly calm that makes the blood in my veins run cold. The man spits on the floor, struggling against his ropes, and Leonardo doesn't even flinch as he signals to Marco, who steps forward with a heavy crowbar in his hand. I stand by Leonardo's side, forcing myself to watch the brutality unfold because this is the price of his world, and I have chosen to be part of it now. The confession is extracted quickly, and the names of the co-conspirators are listed in a broken voice, confirming everything we suspected and giving Leonardo the final pieces he needs to clean house completely. Once the man has given up everything he knows, Leonardo nods to Marco, and the finality of the act hangs in the air like a thick smoke. He turns to me then, ignoring the chaos behind him, and takes my face in his hands, his thumbs tracing the line of my jaw with a surprising gentleness. It is done, he says, and the possessive heat in his eyes sears me to my soul, marking me as his property in a way that no ring or contract ever could. He leads me out of the warehouse and back to the car, shielding me from the sight of the cleanup crew that is already moving into position, and I lean into his strength knowing that the worst is over. We drive back to the estate in silence, but it is a comfortable silence now, filled with the understanding that we have survived the storm together and come out stronger on the other side. When we arrive, the house is quiet and still, and Leonardo leads me straight to his bedroom where he locks the door behind us, shutting out the rest of the world. He undresses me slowly, his hands worshipping every inch of skin that he touches, and I respond with a fervor that matches his own, desperate to erase the memory of the violence we just witnessed. We fall onto the bed together, a tangled mess of limbs and heated breath, and as he moves inside me, I know that I am irrevocably bound to him in every way that matters. The danger will always be a part of our lives, but as I look into his eyes and see the raw, unfiltered love that burns within them, I realize that I am no longer afraid of what comes next. The weeks of recovery have changed me, hardening my resolve just as they have healed my body, and I know that I can stand beside Leonardo without flinching. We dress in silence, the air between us heavy with unspoken promises, and when Leonardo hands me a sleek, dark pistol, I take it without hesitation. My fingers wrap around the grip, cold and reassuring, and I check the chamber with a practiced ease that would have seemed impossible months ago. Leonardo watches me with a mixture of pride and hunger, his gaze tracing the lines of my face as if memorizing me all over again. "Are you ready for this, Alessia?" he asks, his voice a low rumble that vibrates through the floorboards. I nod once, sliding the weapon into the holster at my thigh and smoothing the fabric of my dress over it. "I was born ready, Leonardo," I reply, and the truth of those words settles deep in my bones. We leave the sanctuary of the bedroom and step out into the night where the city lights blur into a kaleidoscope of color against the wet pavement. The drive to the gala is short, but the tension in the car is palpable, a living thing that coils around us and squeezes. Leonardo parks the car, and before he can open his door, I place a hand on his arm to stop him. "Let me walk in first," I say, my voice steady despite the adrenaline flooding my veins. He hesitates for a fraction of a second, then nods, understanding the statement I am making to him and to the world. I step out of the car, the flash of cameras blinding me for a moment, and I lift my chin high as I scan the crowd for any sign of danger. The threat is here, I can feel it in the way the air shifts, but I am not the victim I once was. Leonardo joins me at the top of the stairs, his presence a towering wall of strength beside me, and together we descend into the lion's den. The whispers start immediately, a ripple of shock and curiosity that spreads through the elite gathering like wildfire, but Leonardo ignores them all. He pulls me close, his hand possessive on my lower back, and leads me toward the center of the room where our enemies wait. I spot the man who ordered the hit, a smug smile playing on his lips as he watches us approach, and I feel Leonardo's muscles tense beneath my touch. "Stay close," Leonardo murmurs, his eyes never leaving the target. I move with him, a synchronized dance of predator and partner, and as we reach the center of the floor, the music seems to fade into the background. Leonardo stops, turning to face the room, and his grip on me tightens just enough to let me know that the moment has arrived. "Alessia is mine," he declares, his voice cutting through the murmurs like a knife. "Anyone who comes after her comes after me, and I promise you, they will regret it." The room goes deadly silent, and I feel the weight of every gaze fixed upon us, but I do not shrink away from Leonardo's side. My injury is nothing but a distant memory now, a dull ache that fuels my resolve instead of weakening my knees, and I stand tall with my chin held high. Leonardo scans the crowd with a predatory intensity, his eyes burning with a possessive claim that dares anyone to challenge his declaration. A man steps forward from the shadows near the bar, his hand twitching toward his jacket, and I recognize him immediately as the threat that has been looming over us for weeks. I move before Leonardo can react, stepping in front of him with a steady hand and drawing the small, concealed weapon he insisted I carry. The shot rings out, shattering a crystal glass on the table behind the would-be attacker, and the man freezes in sheer disbelief. "I told you," I say, my voice steady and loud enough for the entire room to hear. "I am not a victim you can use to get to him." Leonardo grips my shoulder, pulling me back against his chest, and I can feel the rapid thrum of his heart matching my own. He nods at his guards, who swarm the man and drag him out into the night, leaving the rest of the patrons staring at us in stunned silence. The tension in the air snaps, replaced by a wary respect, and Leonardo turns me around to face him. His eyes are dark with an emotion that goes far beyond simple lust, and he brushes a stray lock of hair from my face with surprising gentleness. "You proved your loyalty tonight, Alessia," he murmurs, his thumb tracing the line of my jaw. "Now everyone knows you belong to me." I lean into his touch, feeling the power shift between us because I am no longer just the woman he saved, but the woman who stands beside him. The music starts up again, a slower rhythm this time, and he pulls me onto the dance floor to seal our victory in front of his world. We move together, lost in our own private universe, and I know that the danger is far from over, but we will face it as equals. Would you trust him?